and welcome to today's Q&A, the segment where I take your questions from the previous month's Q&A and answer them here in long form, giving them the time they really deserve. If you'd like your question answered in a future installment of this series, please just leave your questions down in the comment section below. I'd be more than happy to read through them and hopefully answer a good number of them in future installments of this series. With that being said, let's jump into it with a little bit of housekeeping, starting with this month's new hour-long lessons. They are fall lessons. They are probably two of my favorite lessons, as it's my favorite time of the year, it's my favorite season, and I think it's probably my favorite color palette as well. You get these really brilliant oranges and yellows in contrast with the blue sky, the complementary colors. They really bring themselves out, and I feel like I love it so much because it's such a limited time of the year. We don't have much of an opportunity to do this. So when we get a chance, I like to really take my time. I like to really work on these things and render some beautiful pieces. And so if you are a subscriber over on Patreon, go and check them out. If you are unaware of what Patreon is essentially a monthly subscription service where you pledge a certain amount and receive varying rewards for doing so. An example, if you pledge $4 a month over there, you receive all of these hour-long painting lessons immediately and a new hour-long lesson every month following that. You also get a digital sketch of each lesson to print out, to trace, to copy for those of you who kind of struggle with the drawing process. Also in it, you get to see me mixing my paints, my colors, and you also get to see when I'm mixing with water. So there's a lot going on over there. They are complex lessons, but they're still good for beginners and intermediate painters as well. You just really learn a lot in them. There is also an $8 level where if you pledge that each month, you receive all of these hour-long painting lessons. They never go away. They do have all the color mixing. They do have the digital sketches. You just get twice as many lessons. So there are 2 lessons added every month to that category as well, so go and check that out. Again, it's a great library and it's a great tool and resource to learn a lot. With that being said, I think we've talked enough about Patreon here. I just got really excited about the fall lessons. Let's jump into the actual Q&A here today. As a new painter, how would you come up with a certain style and/or how to think of something to paint? I think this is a fantastic question because I think it's something most of us have to deal with at some point. I think very few of us go into art, into painting, knowing exactly what we want to do and exactly how to do it. A lot of us have to kind of find our style and find what we're passionate about along the way, because we're passionate about creation, we're passionate about art, but what we create with that passion is generally a little bit more abstract, and we kind of need to go and find it. So what do I implore you to do if you have not yet found your style and what you like doing? It comes back to a lesson that I like to talk about a lot on this channel, and that is dedication over inspiration. A lot of painters, a lot of artists, generally in the beginning, only like to work when they feel inspired, when they have an idea that really moves them and they want to capture and they want to put on the page. But because they're only painting and drawing when they are inspired, when they have these moments, then they're not really in practice. And so when you go to render that thing that you have in your head that you're so passionate about, the skills aren't there yet because the practice just hasn't been put in. So with that in mind, I would implore everyone to draw, to paint very regularly, whether you want to or not. And if you're not sure what to draw, what to paint, what style you want to work in, try to take something that's going to be beneficial down the road. Example, landscapes, anatomy, portraiture. If you master these 3 things, drawing as well, these 4 things, then essentially whenever you have an idea in your head, whenever you want to go out and render something, you'll probably have the knowledge and the know-how to go out and do it. So it's kind of like pre-preparing for these things. And how do you learn how to do these things? I would implore you to use tutorials, to read books, to look at old masters and current YouTubers as well, to see what you're interested in, but always try to be working. Work on something that you're interested in to a decent extent, and eventually through that process, you'll kind of amalgamate all the pieces from different artists that you like and pieces that you find naturally on your own. and it'll kind of form to be your own style, and it'll be your own subject matter, it'll be your own technique, but it'll be an amalgamation of sorts from all these things that you love, which will probably make it mean a lot more to you. So my advice is work often, work frequently, and if you're not sure what to work on tutorials, do practice paintings and drawings. Just ensure that you are always improving, always learning. So stretch your boundaries, try a lot of different things. So when you're inspired, when you do know what your style is, when you do know what you want to really render and create, you can go out and you can do it in just the best way possible. What is your policy regarding students selling their versions of your tutorials? This is a great question, and I know it's so complicated with copyright and all these different laws and rules, so I'm going to make this easy. And this doesn't apply to all YouTubers, it doesn't apply to all artists, but you can apply it to me specifically. Any creation you do from my 10-minute painting lessons or my hour-long painting lessons that I offer here on this channel or on that Patreon account, then you are allowed to sell your renditions of those works. Anything from the 10-minute or hour-long painting lessons. I want this channel to be something that inspires you to paint, that lets you go out and create things that you really love, but also to benefit you and your process through it. And that also means monetarily. So if you are creating these 10-minute paintings, if you are creating the really complex hour-long paintings, then I am more than happy to allow you to kind of go out and sell those. And I think that's something that, we should always be thinking about as artists. Example, if you are over on my Patreon and you are pledging at the $8 level and you're getting the 2-hour-long lessons every month, if you do each of those hour-long lessons and you sell them each for $50, $100, then that is a huge financial benefit to you. And it's business, but it's something that a lot of artists need to learn if you want to become a full-time artist. So I try to make sure that this is advantageous for everyone as they're working on my lessons. Again, this isn't a general rule. It isn't something that works for every YouTuber, every painter, every someone you see on Instagram. But for me specifically, again, if you're doing the 10-minute painting lessons or the hour-long lessons, you are more than welcome to sell your renditions of those works. With that being said, I also do some oil works that I post over on Instagram and speed paintings. Those aren't things that I'm like you to sell or work on. Those are more personal pieces for me. So please don't do that. But anything in the 10-minute or hour-long title, you are more than welcome to. How often do you change the water in your container when painting with acrylics? This is a great question. It's something that I think varies depending upon the color palette that you're using. But a good general safe answer is change it all the time, every time you're changing to a drastically different color. If you're working with a much darker palette, if you're working with much more grays and browns and it's a little bit more muddy, and I don't mean muddy in the way that all of the paint's kind of just turning into the same thing on the canvas, but more so a palette that's a little bit darker, a little bit more earth tones. You can generally get away with a lot more with those palettes, and they can generally be a little bit more dirty. You can use a little bit more of a dirty water. However, if you're using something like a black or a dark blue, and your water has that pigment in it, and then you go to use a yellow, and you want to render like a pure yellow on your canvas, you dip that into the water, it's going to dilute it, and you're probably not going to get a pure yellow like what you had on your palette and what you intended to have on your canvas. Instead, you'll have kind of an amalgamation. It'll be more of a green, it'll be a little bit darker, it'll be a little bit dirtier, and you won't really have what you want. So what I would implore you to do is definitely change your water every time you go from a darker pigment or a muddy pigment to something that's much more bright and delicate, specifically pinks, yellows, whites, things akin to that. But again, as a general rule, it's probably best that you're changing your water every time you're really changing your pigment. And I know that might seem like a bit of an arduous process, but it can really pay off in the end with your painting. You can get away with it, again, with a lot of works, but it's something to keep in mind with the color palettes you're using, and also experiment as well. Because sometimes you don't need to take that time. If you watch my hour-long lessons, I'll probably switch my water 3 or 4 times within that hour-long period, which could be more frequently, but I think we do a good job with that frequency. So it's very dependent on the color palette you're using, on how dirty that water actually is. So many little factors. It can become a little bit intuitive, but you do have the general rule there as well. Which artist is inspiring to you? This is a great question because I think it goes back to the first question, which was again about inspiration and finding your style. I think that I found a lot of the idea behind my paintings in the following artists. Thomas Cole, Thomas Moran, John Martin. They were all painters who did almost exclusively landscapes, but they made them very grand. They made them very visceral. They had a lot of emotion in them. They transported you there, and they made things feel big and experiential. And that's something that, while my paintings don't look like their paintings, they intend to do. They are intended to put you somewhere, to make you feel an emotion, to kind of deliver something special to you in that same regard, in this kind of grand nature. And so that is something I generally try to do in my paintings. That is something I took away from those painters. And they're three of my favorite painters. My favorite painters are generally like 17th, 18th century landscape painters, but there's also a lot of great contemporary work going on as well. And on that note, I'm actually really curious, what do you love in art? What are the artists that you really enjoy? List some of your favorite inspirations in the comment section down below so that we can all kind of read through them, find new artists, new inspiration. I think that's so important with these channels, with YouTube, with social media in general. It brings ideas and people together. It builds these artistic communities. And if we all just list one painter who we really love, who inspires us, then we can all find new artists and new inspiration. And hopefully we can answer that question, that first question that was asked, for a lot of people as well. So let's help each other out. Let's build this community. List your favorite artists in the comment section down below, the people who you learn from, the people who you're inspired by, and we'll see what happens. With that being said, I think that is going to be the end of the Q&A here today. Again, if you have any questions for future Q&A series, please leave them down in the comment section down below as well. I keep saying down and I don't know. Definitely a good thing we're ending the episode when we are. And as always, as a lot of you know, if you are new to acrylic painting, if you are looking to learn more, there is a link in the description to my ebook, Acrylics for Beginners, where we really talk about just about everything. Also, again, if you want to do some fall paintings, if you want to do some holiday paintings coming up, there is a link in the description to my Patreon where I do have the hour-long lessons where you can follow along with me every step of the way. You get the digital sketches. You can learn a lot. And again, if you complete them, if you really like them, you are more than welcome to sell them as well and maybe make some money. So with that being said, thank you so much for watching. I can't wait to talk to you again. And above all, as always, stay creative.